five promises effectively.
5 rules. Yep.
5 rules. I'll call them rules. And I just want to go through a few of them,
Sure.
one by one. I'm interested in your comment on running government surpluses. It's stayed away from saying every year, and you've said over the economic cycle. Obviously, economic cycles can come and go. Just take me through your thinking on why you've used that language.
Sure. So our expectation is that we will run a surplus every year. That's the expectation we want to set on ourselves. We did that when Labour was last in office. But the reality is that the economic cycle doesn't always allow for that, and the current government has encountered that. You might get an external economic shock, it might be a natural disaster, or just the general movement of the cycle. You cannot always guarantee a surplus. And so what we're saying is, across that cycle, our goal is the delivery of a surplus. In terms of defining the cycle, that's one of the things that the external independent group is going to help us do. There is some general views around a cycle, somewhere between 5 and 8 years, the movement between growth in the economy and then moving back down, possibly to recession, and then back up again. You can set the boundaries around that. But we learned some lessons actually from looking at what Gordon Brown did when he had his fiscal golden rule. He got himself in a bit of trouble because he self-defined the economic cycle and then changed it twice. And so we're not prepared to do that. We're saying let's actually have the independent body help assess that. The other side of the equation on what's a sustainable surplus, I think, is really important. And what we mean by that is that we think that there are, particularly right at the moment, a number of important social issues that need to be addressed, that we are prepared to spend some more on now to ensure that we get on top of them.
So could it be that to do that from year one for the extra spending, then we could see deficits in year one?
Yeah.
Is the language specifically like that in case you have extra coalition partners, for example?
Not particularly, no, but it is focusing on the fact that we can see a series of pressing social needs right now in housing and health and education particularly, and we want to be able to address those. And so, Andrew Little's made the comment that we believe that we can meet the spending promises that we've made from existing revenue. We have to take a look at the budget, and the reason I'm being slightly hesitant about the exact scale of a surplus or anything like that is we do need to see the latest budget numbers to be able to make that clear. But our belief is the forecasts that we've seen, the trajectory that the economy's on, we do think the revenue is there to meet the promises.
And it sounds like you're really going for this, type of economic thinking that government can expand spending in the downtime and withdraw spending in the good times?
Well, potentially. I mean, that's certainly the neo-Keynesian kind of style of the last Labour government, and certainly I can see the value in that approach, yes. The point being, we're staring down the barrel of some pretty large surpluses coming up, and we've got them built, in our view, off a number of people missing out. And so our view is now is the right time to spend, to invest, to make sure we're giving opportunities. So that's what we mean by sustainable surplus. I was pretty concerned as the current government found themselves not getting to surplus, which they'd promised they would do. I was pretty concerned to see them start to shift money around in a way that I didn't feel was a genuine surplus. And so we're committing ourselves to making sustainable surpluses, and the independent body gets to assess whether or not they think we're making a reasonable fist of describing the economic cycle, not shifting the goalposts.
We'll talk about the economic body in a bit, but
Yep.
You're talking about social investment, housing. You also want to ramp up infrastructure spending, I think, from day one, and also one of these promises, rules, is to resume contributions to the super fund. So can that all be done in year one?
Yeah, it has to be phased, and it has to be done in a way that's controlled. So we're not saying it can all be done in total on day one.
Is there a list of priorities that you've
Sure,
got
so that's what the
Greens?
point here is. So the first call on it, as we've said, is that longer term expenditure, the stuff that deals with the big long term liabilities that are ahead of us. And we'll make our announcement around the exact amount of our contribution to the super fund once we've seen the budget numbers. We've got, it would be irresponsible in my view to do anything else. So that's obviously one of the first calls.
And would the resumption to the super fund, because I know there's been a lot of questions in question time at the moment about resumptions to the super fund and National not doing that at the moment. And they've come back and said, look, it's silly to do that whilst you're still in deficit. So
but they're not. They're in surplus.
Well, we're in surplus now, right? So would it only be resumptions to the super fund if there's a surplus?
Well, my view at the moment is we are going to be in surplus, and I don't think anyone thinks we're not going to be in surplus as a country at this budget. So yes, we'll be resuming immediately. What we want to do is take a look at those budget numbers and then make our call about the scale of the contribution.
So all of the extra spending in year one will effectively be from the forecast surplus?
Yeah, I mean, we are creating some new revenue streams around the 5-year Bright Line test, and a certain amount of.
They'll take 5 years though.
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, we believe the money is there, the revenue is there to do that. The rules get read together, and our view is that when you put this together with a slightly more pragmatic debt track, that the funding is there to do the infrastructure spend and also to do the social spending that's needed.
Well, we'll talk about that debt track. So you've promised to get net debt, core Crown net debt to GDP down to 20% within 5 years of forming a government. That's an extra 2 years, give or take.
Yep, correct.
To do that. Have you got any sort of idea of how much this might give you?
We've done some costings on that, but we want to wait until we see the final budget numbers.
2 billion, 3 billion?
I'm not even going to go there. I don't think it's responsible to throw a number around until we see the real numbers we'll be dealing with in May. But we have looked at that clearly, and yes, it gives us some more headroom, and we'll obviously use that to fulfil the other promises that are there. Are
there any worries that there's? I'm sure there's a huge queue of policies on the social side. Any worries in the back benches or from your front bench of who's going to be first in first?
Oh, everyone's always worried about that, and that's the nature of running a responsible fiscal regime when you've got a lot of things we want to achieve for the country. We've been very clear about our priorities this time round. It's housing, it's health, it's education. We've made a commitment around police numbers. We've made some commitments around child poverty. They are the priorities. My caucus is very well aware of that. That doesn't mean we aren't going to start down the path of some other things. And the point that we made today, which is I think every government makes, but it's important to say, is we will look at every dollar that's currently being spent. Look at the education budget. We don't want charter schools to carry on. That money can be used in other ways. So it's not just about spending money out of surplus revenue. It's also about re-looking at other expenditure that's there.
So you've talked about this independent auditor. How exactly do you envisage that working?
So, I mean, there are examples of this around the world. You can look at the Congressional Budget Office, you can look at the Office of Budget Responsibility in the UK. Australia's got their own version of it as well. Essentially, it's an agency independent of ministers. We could ask the Treasury to do this work.
Well, opposition parties used to get a Treasury secondee during election years, I thought.
You used to be able to get one. You have to pay for it. And when opposition parties have got limited budgets and you have to pay the full cost of a senior advisor from the Treasury, it tends to be a little more expensive than you might like.
So you'd probably have this separate from Treasury.
Yeah, our view is that Treasury does a great job in providing advice to the Minister of Finance and doing the forecasting work and so on that it does. It should keep doing that. What this is about is giving credibility to these rules and saying we will assess them independently of a minister. There's probably two models for how you could do that. One of those is an Officer of Parliament function like the Auditor General, and in fact potentially it could use the Auditor General's office as a backstop in terms of its backroom kind of functions and so on. The other option is more like a commission thing, not a structure like the Families Commission, but obviously not the Families Commission, where you've got a separate board or a separate entity away from the minister. So we're looking at that. It's not going to be a massive agency. It's actually going to be quite a modest agency. Its job is to assess whether the rules have been met, assess the forecasts that underlie our ability to meet those rules, and we've added in the idea of costing opposition party policies.
And so what happens if it finds something's gone wrong? You haven't met the rules.
That's right. I mean, sunlight is the disinfectant here.
Is that all it would be? Just a report?
Yep, it would be. But I think you would find it would put enormous pressure on a future government to meet the rules, because you would be being heavily exposed if you had not done so. Similarly, with the costing of opposition parties' policies, it's not there to judge them. It's not there to say this is a good policy or a bad policy. It's there to say, is this a realistic assessment of the costings? And I think it's one of the things that's missing in our system at the moment. I think it actually kind of diminishes our democracy a bit, and so that's a good role for it to be able to play. That was a Green Party proposal that they made, and it's one that we think is a good idea.
Okay, so isn't there a danger it just effectively turns into a treasury for the opposition?
I guess you could look at it that way. We've given it some pretty specific roles here, particularly the monitoring of our ability to meet these rules. That will be something that will be useful for.
Surely I can go out though in 2 years' time and see if your net government spending has gone more than 34% of GDP.
Yeah, there's both science and art in here, and it's important that things like measurement of what is an economic cycle is done and understood, but also just that it is seen to be independent. We want people to take these rules seriously. We want them to be seen as credible. We think that the best way to do that is to have an independent body behind it.
On tax, you've talked about establishing a new tax working group after the election. The Greens are going to go into the election with some pretty hefty tax policies, I imagine, probably raising the top income rate, land tax, stamp duties. How is that going to work in government?
Well, I'm not responsible for what the Greens take to the election, and one of the things we talked about today is this is the framework. The individual parties who've signed up to this today have said we'll go to the election with our own policies. The public vote and the proportionate influence on those policies is aligned to how much vote you get. We're sticking to our view that the best thing we can do right now is a system-wide review around taxation. The difference between this working group and the 2010 working group is that we are setting a mandate for this group, and the mandate is a better balance in our taxation system. That means that I think it will come out with much more focused policies that we can then put before the public.
But still might not be politically palatable.
That's possible, but we still think if we give it that mandate, then we will at least have a more focused set of policies that we can then look at.
Okay. Have you had any reaction from other potential coalition partners? Has Winston been on the phone?
No, not as far as I'm aware. And look, we wouldn't expect that either. The New Zealand First Party doesn't do prenuptial agreements, but we believe that these rules would be something that a number of political parties would want to sign up to, and would be certainly happy if others did.
All right. Just back on the super fund very quickly, is there any expectation of how much you'd want to put in?
Look, I would want to put the most that is fiscally sustainable in. I think it is one of the highest priorities for New Zealand, but we've got to balance that alongside the other priorities that we have and the amount of money that's available. So we'll make that judgment once we've seen the numbers in May.